The counter numbers iExpression generates counters like countdowns or stuff like this, and it can directly be applied to text layers. So I have two text layers here in this composition. This is one that we look at later, and here we have this test text layer, and if we just select the layer and no property on it and apply it, by default you can see it turns this text into 1000.00. And now you can change this number by entering here another number. Say we apply it to 500, then it becomes 500. And usually you want to animate. So instead of adding here a fixed, setting here a fixed number, you select your layer, only the layer and no property, and click on this linking symbol. And then iExpressions asks whether it should create a new slider control, and so you say yes. And now you have linked this property here to a slider. I click on E to reveal all effects, which is in this case only this slider. And now we can keyframe the slider. Say we have here a value of 0 and here a value of, or say 100. And now we need to apply again the expression to our text layer. Apply, and you can see it jumps to 100 and it counts down from, or counts up in this case, from 0 to 100. Now you can modify how this number here is formatted. And so, for example, you can say I want to have 3 decimal places. If I apply this again to our layer, apply, you can see now it has 3 zeros after the decimal point. And by the way, let's just enable here auto apply such that all changes are applied automatically. If you set this decimal places to 0 and click somewhere else, you can see now it has no decimal places at all, so no comma values. And then you also have leading zeros. So if you set this, for example, to 3, then your number is always extended to contain 3 digits. Yeah, so it counts from 000 to 100 in this case. Then, so these are the decimal places and the leading zeros. Then we have here this multiply counter with, and this is in case you want to create really huge numbers, yeah, and say your slider has only a value up to 30,000, but you want to go higher with your numbers. You can say, I multiply my values, for example, with 1000. And if I do this, you can see now it doesn't count from 0 to 100, but actually from 0 to 100,000, because we multiplied our values with 1000. Yeah, so very useful if you want to create really huge numbers. Of course, in this case here, the 3 leading zeros do not make sense. Yeah, you can see it starts with 3 leading zeros and ends up with a number with 6 digits in total. So in this case, you would rather set the leading zeros to 6, such that your number counts from 0000 to this 1000, or you leave it at no digits at all, like this. Okay, then you have the separator symbols, and this is in case you have decimal places. So let's add 2 decimal places here again. Yeah, you can say, I mean, in the English part of the world, you usually set here a point, but in Europe, for example, it's very common to set here a comma. If you do this, you can put here also a comma, and you can put there anything you like. Yeah, you can put here a minus. Of course, this is something you usually do not want, but here you can determine how does this separator look like. And then we also have a thousands separator symbol. And if we set here, enter here, for example, just a space. So I click the space bar. Now we have here a space, and I go somewhere else. You can see that in between the hundreds here and the thousands, this space symbol is entered. And if we enlarge our values here, so I increase my multiplier such that we have even larger numbers, you can see it groups them into these groups of 3 with this separator symbol. Yeah? And also if we increase our decimal places to, let's say, 6, yeah, now you can see we have 6 numbers behind our decimal place, and also these are grouped with these spaces in between here using this thousand separator symbol. Yeah, so I remove this space symbol here, and now you can see the number is written like this. And now I add here a space symbol, and then a space is inserted between each group of 3 digits. And also, of course, you can enter here something else. So for example, in Europe, it's common to put here a point and here a comma. And if you do this, you can see the thousands are grouped with points and the actual decimal place is marked with a comma. Okay, so this is formatting of the number. So let's put this here back to space and point. And then you have surrounding text, which allows you to modify your text. So let me just make here some more space to add something before and after it. So for example, let's say this should not be a plain number, but these should be dollars. So you could say text after is simply a dollar symbol. And now these here turn into dollars. Maybe it's better here to put a space before the dollar, and then the space is also inserted here. Or you want to insert the dollar before, like this. Yeah, and then you can also, of course, enter here arbitrary other text like sales volume, or whatever, and it is automatically inserted here before our text. And here you can see we have our counter, and this static text is inserted before or after our text. So if you now think, well, very nice, but I know there is this effect numbers, and why should I use the iExpression instead of the numbers effect? Well, there are certain advantages of the iExpression. So first, it directly works on text layers. And this means you don't render like an image on some solid layer, but you have a continuously rasterizing a true text, and you can modify it with all the things you are used to. So you can align it, you can set the paragraph here, you can modify the characters, adjust stuff like tracking and so on. All these things cannot be done easily with this other effect. And also, you can configure your decimal marker symbol freely, which is very useful, and you have these thousands separator symbol. Yeah, you can enter here, for example, a space to group your numbers to 3 digits, which is also very useful. And you can add text like the sales volume dollar before your text, which is also not easily possible with the numbers effect. And finally, the numbers effect is limited to numbers of at least or at most 30,000. Yeah, it cannot generate larger numbers. And as you can see here, it's no problem for this iExpression to generate much larger numbers, and indeed they can get much larger than this, and it is no problem at all. Okay, that's counter numbers, and now let's take a look at a counter for dates. The counter date iExpression is similar to the counter numbers, instead that it is useful to animate dates instead of plain numbers. It's also applied to text layers, or also as a counter numbers to the source text property of text. So you can either select the text layer or the source text property and click on apply. And you can see that the text is changed into some date. And if you want to animate this date, what you have to do is you link this first property here to a slider and animate it to values between 0 and 100. And then you say which date corresponds to the value 0 and which to the value 100. So it's like the first and the last date, and then you animate between the two, and the text automatically animates accordingly. So we select our layer, not our property, but just the layer, and click here on this link, such that iExpressions asks whether we want to create a new slider control. And we say yes. And now if we look here at E for effects, we have here this slider, and let's animate this from 0. Let's move the keyframe for 0 here to the beginning, and then let's say here around 400 we set another keyframe with value 100. Now if we apply this again to our layer, so not to this slider but to our text layer or to the source text property, and click apply, you can see that we now have a date that is animating from January the 6th, 1972, which is our start date. And now you can see the numbers here, the years increase from 72 until 81, and it ends on March 13, 1981, which is here our end date. And let me just select it again and click on auto apply to make sure that all our changes we do now are transferred automatically. And now we can change here our start date, for example, to say it's February the 1st, 1972. And if we apply this change, you can see now our start date here for value 0 is February the 1st, 1972. So you can very easily determine the range of dates that you want to animate over. And then, of course, an important thing when it comes to dates is a flexible formatting. And all approaches that I've seen to formatting dates are either very complicated or they are easy, but they are not flexible. You cannot change much. And I tried here to really get a good balance between these two aspects. So formatting here is comparably easy, and it is very, very powerful. So you have 4 ingredients for your date, namely the year, the month, the day, and the weekday. And this date format string here at the beginning tells you in what order are these 4 shown and which of them are shown at all. So let's say you don't want Thursday or Tuesday here at all, but you just want to know months, which date of the day of the month and the year. Yeah. Then you can see here the current string. First there is %W, which is the weekday. Then there is this comma here, yeah, this one, and a space, and then there comes the month, the day, and the year. Yeah, month, day, and year. And if you remove this here and click somewhere else, you can see the date updates, and we have now first the month, then the day, and then the year. And if you want to have the day in front of the month, you can just remove it here and write it here in front, %D for day, space, and now you have the day in front. Yeah. Or if you say you don't want to have spaces here in between, but want to have such minus symbols like this, just enter them, and you can see the minus symbols appear here. Yeah. So this date format string explains how to combine the different elements of your date, in what order, and which symbols are in between. And now you can fine-tune each of these ingredients. So for example, for the year format, you can say, okay, I just want 2 digits. Yeah. And if you do this, you can see that 1972 becomes just 72. And also for the month format, you can say, okay, I want to have full month names, or I can want abbreviate month names or short versions, or I want them to be numbered. Yeah, I just want February to be 02, or if I choose this one here, just 2. And similarly, you have also different formats for the day. Yeah, you can say here something like first, so you can do something like, let's again put here the months before our day. Yeah, like this. And then we have February 1st, 72. Or you can also, if you like, you can just put here a the in between. Then you have February the 1st, 72. So it's really very flexible. And in case you also want to have the weekdays, so let's add them here again, %W. Also, these are flexibly formatted. So instead of Tuesday, you can say, I want to have the short form Tu, for example. In case you work in foreign languages, not English, you have here possibilities to translate these terms like February or Tuesday to your language. Just look here at month name, and then you can say January in my language is this word, so you can replace it to do translations. And the same we also have here for the weekdays. So the weekday names can also be translated to foreign languages if you like. Okay, the last thing that is left here is the surrounding text. So here you can add some text before and after. This is the same as for the counter numbers. So you can say something like today is. And if you now go here, it says today is Tuesday, February the 1st, 72. And of course, all of this still animates, so the date animates as you would expect. Okay, this is an overview over the counter date. And now let's take a look at the third variant, which is the counter time, that is similar to the date, instead that it counts not over full dates, but only over time values. The counter time iExpression is very similar to the counter date, instead that it doesn't count over dates, but as you might expect, over times. Again, you have to link some slider control to this property here, and we do this by clicking on our layer with no property selected and clicking on this link symbol, and then say yes, we want to create a new slider control. And this new slider control is now here under effects, and we can keyframe it. Now we can set, for example, some keyframe for the value 0 here, and then here some keyframe for 100. And we should always keyframe it for values between 0 and 100, because here we now specify what is the time value for 0 and what is the time value for 100. And if we apply this now to the source text of our text layer, so we select the source text and click apply, you can see we have here now a time value that goes from this value for 0 to this value for 100. Right? In between you can keyframe however you like. So if you say here we want to go back to 0, you just set here another keyframe for 0, and now from this point it counts backwards from this time back to this time. Okay, so these are the first two parameters. Here you can enter always something in the format hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. And you can skip the last part. So if you put here something like 4, then 4, let's look at how this is looking like. Of course, we have to reapply it. So select our source text and click apply. And I click here on auto apply such that all following changes now are applied automatically. You can see 4 is interpreted as something like 4 hours time. And if you click 4:30, it considers it at 4 hours, 30 minutes, and then you can get more precise, and 59 seconds. And then you can add milliseconds if you like. Yeah, it's like 99 milliseconds, and then it interprets this as 0.99 milliseconds, for example. And of course, you can also write here 0.99 if you like. So that's the format how you enter here the times. And now you can say times between days between 0 and 100. Yeah. So if these here are time values, and you can see it counts from 4 in this case to 33. Yeah. Here, and at the end here at this keyframe it's at 33. If we say there are 2 days in between this time and this time, and see how this is changing, you can see that now it counts much quicker because it goes from 4 hours way here until 24, yeah, and then starts again at the beginning and counts another full round of 24 hours, and then finally it arrives at the date you give here. So if you put here a 2, this means it will do like 2 full circles of 24 hours before it arrives at this date. So yeah, if you need to count over more than 1 day, very convenient to do this. Let's now reset this. And finally, of course, an important question is, how do I format this date? How do I specify how it is looking like? So here you always have to enter the date in, or the time, in this format. You cannot write here something like 4 hours or so, but always in such a format. But here you can determine how your format, how the output is formatted, how it is looking like. Yeah. And what you can specify is, again, as with the date format, you have here some format string, and %h, where you have a small h, is the hours. Yeah, %m represents the minutes, %s the seconds, and %l the milliseconds. And if you say, for example, I don't want to have milliseconds here, simply remove the milliseconds from the end, and you can see they magically disappeared here. Now we have still these points here because we have them in the format string. Delete these points too, and you have a date like this. If you say, oh, I also don't want seconds, just remove the seconds here and they will disappear, and you have a counter that only shows hours and minutes. And now you can, of course, also modify this. So instead of these points here, you can just write here hours and %m minutes. And if we do this, now it writes here 12 hours and 04 minutes. Yeah, so very flexible. You can enter in this format string whatever you like, and this %h is replaced by the hours, %m replaced by the minutes, and so on. Now you can say, how are these hours formatted? So currently you can see here are 7 hours. So sometimes you want rather something like here 0, 0 to 0. Now it makes 0, 7 hours. Yeah. So this means hours range from 0 to 0 to 23. Yeah. So one letter numbers get an one digit numbers get an additional 0 at the end, at the beginning. And then you can also format it much different here. Like, for example, you can go from 1 to 24. You can go from 1 to 12. Yeah, which means for 24 hours it makes 2 rounds for up to 12. And then you can also say something like 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. So in this case, 7 becomes 7 a.m. And if you also have here p.m. values, yeah, so for example 2 p.m., if we format this not as 2 p.m. but as 0 to 24, it's 14. Yeah, of course this formatting makes no sense with this format string. Yeah, but we can say something like this, and now we have only 11 a.m. without any other formatting elements. And you can also say here AM with dots behind it. And the difference between this one and this one is that this one has spaces. Yeah, so you have 5 space PM, and here you have 5 PM without any space in between. Okay, these are the number formats, very flexible, choose whatever you like best. I go back here to this 0, 0 to 23. And now let's add here again %m and %s for seconds and %l for the milliseconds. Now we have again here our full time thing, and I see here we have a space, so we remove it like this. And of course you can put here instead of the dots anything you like, yeah, or slashes, whatever. Minutes format. Minutes format, you just say, okay, either I have always 2 digits or I have 1 digit. Yeah, simple here. In this case, if I set it like this, you can see 1 digit minutes like this. Here you have just a 2. And if you change it to this value, you have 02 instead. For the seconds, it's exactly the same. And for the milliseconds, you also can choose whether you always have 3 digits or whether the number of digits is varying. Okay, and then the only additional thing you have is this surrounding text. I've shown this for the counter date and counter time, counter numbers previously in this tutorial, so it's exactly the same. You can set some static text before and after this time if you like. Yeah, write here something like time, like this, and then it will put it here. Okay, that's it for the counter time, and now we're going to look at the counter date and time, which is essentially a combination of the counter date and the counter time. The counter date and time iExpression is like a combination of the counter date and the counter time. This means if you know how to use the counter date and the counter time, you also know how to use this one, and it is able to create combinations of dates with associated times. So if I just apply it to the source text property here and apply, you can see it creates a quite long string. So let's make this a bit smaller. So it creates some date together with a time. And again, you animate this by linking it to some slider. And in this case, I don't create a new slider, but I select here an existing one that I've prepared. So my date and time slider, and link it there. And now I select my source text property and click on apply. And I click on auto apply such that all changes we are going to do in the following now are automatically applied instantaneously. And now you can see you animate here over, so the date is quickly changing and then the time is changing. And when your slider is at 0, the date that is shown is what we have here in date for value 0. Here you can specify a date and the corresponding time, and exactly this date and time you see here. And for the value 100, you see we have another date and another time. And if we go here in our slider to the value of 100, you see this date and time combination. So exactly the same as for counter date or counter time, except that you have both these values now. And also with the format, you have now a quite huge format string where you can determine what you want to include in your format. So let me enlarge this here. You can see we have all the choices that we had for the date format. So you can format your year, your month, your day, and your weekday, and also all the format things we had for the time. So the hours, the minutes, the seconds, and the milliseconds can be formatted here as you like. So if you don't know these parameters yet, please look a bit earlier in this tutorial where I explain the counter date and counter time functions, iExpressions, because they have exactly these same parameters. And now you have here this large format string that contains all of these parameters. And if you say, okay, I don't want the weekday, you can just remove here the W at the beginning and let everything start with the month. And if I now click somewhere else, it's applied, and you have here just March 13, 1981 and this time. And if you say I don't want the milliseconds here, you can just go and remove the %L from the end, apply this, and now you have something like this. Yeah, so you can arbitrarily adjust this, and of course write anything here in between. Yeah, like at or so, and then it writes here March at this and that time. Okay, I think this is already everything I want to explain here. The month names, week names is exactly the same as in the date format iExpression, as in the counter date iExpression, and also the surrounding text that you can put before and after this actual text you have seen in the other counters before. Okay, so in summary, all these counters work like you have some slider control that you link your first property here to, and then you say what date or date-time combination corresponds to the value 0 and which one to the value 100 of your slider control, and you animate that and get your date and time that can be very flexibly formatted with the idea of these format strings. Okay, that's it. My name is Matthias, and I hope you enjoyed this quick overview over the counter iExpressions from mamoworld.com.